Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you for all your wonderful sayings, Dr.
Thank you.
Meltzer. I think they're marvelous.
Thank you.
I have so many problems, I really don't know where to begin.
Let's start at the beginning.
Well, I've separated from my husband
Yeah.
after years of misery and misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm alone now with 2 children, school children.
How old are the children?
One is 12 and one is 15.
Okay.
They come from a small community, and they're living now in a small apartment in New York.
In other words,
very unhappy.
But let's say they come. You come also. Didn't you
Yes.
live with them? Sure.
Well,
How long have you been separated?
Well, I'm more of a New Yorker than they are, let us say.
How long have you been separated from your
Just
husband?
in a year.
1 year, yes.
Yes. And now he writes me and phones and wants us, to come back. And yet I don't see that there's any change to the pattern. The only thing that seems to prompt, I'm alone, and I'm trying to work temporarily because I've been a woman that's been out of the job market a long time. And even though I have an education, it's still not easy.
Right.
And, of course, economically, our circumstances are severe.
Is he helping support the family?
Yes, he does help. He does do that.
Why did you leave him? Why did you leave him?
Because we were very unhappy together.
Well, no.
Unhappy.
Remember, life and married life is a lot more than just being happy or at all times. Why did you leave him?
He was doing things that I was very much against.
For example, running around with other women?
No, and not that I know. That I'm not aware of.
Well, what were you against?
He was a gambler.
Well,
he was interested in taking. His claim was that he wanted to put away money to help, in the family in the end.
Mm.
But in the end, it was as if he was just playing around with any funds that became available. He robbed Peter to pay Paul.
Now, is that why you left him?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. I think mostly it was that there was never any communication, any community of feeling. I was the one always that, saw to the family and took care of the things, birthdays, holidays.
Let me ask a question. Now that you're 1 year away from him, are you happier?
No.
Are you more lonely?
I don't know. I'm too busy, really, to think about my own. I don't think about my own loneliness as much as I think about making the family a happier unit or a more productive unit and a more contented unit.
Well, of course, you see, many women and men discover that once they break up the marriage, out there are an awful lot of problems, sometimes a lot worse than what they had in their married life. That's why I want to know the severity of your unhappiness.
That most of all, what really upsets me is that the children are finding it very hard to adjust.
Well, that's important, too. That
I feel guilty about taking them away from
well, you see,
something.
In other words, these 2 children, now 12 and 15, and now really are in their formative years.
Yes.
And your husband, by the way, is saying, please come back. And I think this is a good...
But on his terms.
Well, why is it his terms?
Because he goes through the same kind of thing. Like he sends me, for instance, something. He gets involved in all kinds of deals, and he'll send me something through the mail and say, "Well, you have to sign this as my spouse," and it's some kind of guarantor thing. He wants to work with an insurance agency, and he sends me a letter saying, well, you have to sign this as a guarantor, and know what a guarantor is. As a guarantor, you're signing away
well, see, of course,
liability.
You have to understand, too, sweetheart, if you don't live with him, if you're not married to him, you won't have to sign any of it. But you'll also not get support. And, of course, I would say this. Since he wants you to come back, and you're saying on his own terms, I would say there's room for negotiation here. I think what you ought to do is you ought to insist, yes, I might consider coming back, provided you and I, my dear hubby, agree to start going to a marriage counselor to try to see if we can straighten out some of the problems. I think that's very, very important.
He's always been very averse to doing that.
Well, maybe this time he will, because remember, he's asking you to come back. And these are going to be this is going to be one of the conditions under which you come back. And remember, it's a lot easier to break up a marriage than to put up with all the problems that go once the marriage breaks up. Because once the marriage breaks up, it's from what you tell me, your husband can't support two families.
No, it's very
That's
hard.
right. Remember, once his marriage breaks up, he's going to go around looking for another family. And he probably will marry another woman who has children, which means that your children will suffer. And then, too, you have a hassle of trying to keep, especially if you, in turn, start, let's say, dating other men, or living with other men, or marrying other men. Well, honey, well, you can't say that, darling. If you're not interested in other men at this point, then I'm saying, honey, you're missing a lot. And it's quite possible, darling, and please forgive me for saying this, that the statement you made, probably if I talked to your husband, he would probably indicate that one of the reasons why he is so unhappy with a marriage is because he has a wife that shows him no affection. See, it goes both ways, darling.
Well, you know, Dr. Meltzer, when you live with someone that, you know, I have another child who is older and lives away from home, but when you live with someone for over 20 years...
It's hard to break it up.
It isn't that, I mean, but you think that if that person has not at this point known you or understood what you've done and the sacrifices you've made and things that you've tried to do and give, you know, and still gone on his merry way, you know, working up, acting like he was single.
Well, sweetheart, you will find that if you break up with him, you're going to have a lot of problems that you don't have now. And then, too, the chances are your second mate, if you have a second mate, will be a lot like your first mate, but your problems now will be compounded. So before you go through this divorce, my recommendation is, it's easy nowadays to get a divorce. It's very hard to keep a marriage going. And when a marriage breaks up, both parties will suffer. You will suffer, honey. Because once your husband comes to the conclusion that you don't want him, you watch to see what happens with the money.
It'll go.
You're not going to get advocate support. Not because he doesn't want to support his family, but this is the way a typical man reacts, which I call beating your wife into the ground.
Yeah, that's right.
So, honey?
Well, of course, you know...
Are you asking me whether I think you should give it another try?
Yeah, I guess
I say there's too much involved here not to give it another try.
There's a great deal, you know, that you can't go into, and I understand.
Is there anything good about him? Is there anything good about him? Okay. You hear the question I asked you?
Yes.
Is there anything
well,
good?
I guess the fact that he's sending some support, you know, is good.
Yeah.
He hasn't seen the children all this time.
Well,
he's called, but he doesn't come to see them.
Well, which indicates to me there must be something good about him. Remember, you married him. And again, I say, these days, many of us are getting the impression that marriage is only for a lot of fun, and when the fun goes, we get a new marriage. Sweetheart?
I've had hard times. We've had a lot of hard times together. But the hard times didn't seem to stop, you know. They seem to go on and on.
Well, you'll find the hard times might get worse if you break up.
Yeah.
Honey, the number of Prince Charmings out there are very few and far between.
I'm not thinking that isn't the reason for the breaking, you know. I mean,
all right. How about the financial problem of trying to raise two kids?
That's a big thing.
And how about the loneliness that comes with this, honey? How about the fact
Well, I think that if you're really human and outgoing to people and have interests and the vitality about life, then you don't really feel that lonely, do you?
Yes, you do, honey. I'd say give it a chance, but try to negotiate something where you, let's say, see if you can put the marriage together right. I would say one of the conditions for going back is that you and him agree to start talking to a therapist. One that you can respect. Very important.
I was interested in getting in touch with the doctor that was speaking.
Well, sure. That's what to see what. But Dr. Polentz tried to talk about many marriage counselors. You go to them because they have the degrees.
Well, I respected what she said.
But you have to go to someone that you can respect. Because as she was telling me the other day, somebody came running to her and they said, how can I relate to this marriage counselor? And she said, this man and woman walked into somebody who was about 24 years old, sitting in his office in sandals.
No, I couldn't.
And his hair was long, unkempt. He had a gold chain around his neck. His shirt that hadn't been washed for weeks. And how can you relate to a marriage counselor like that?
No, I would have to have someone like yourself who has maturity and understanding and knows life.
Thank you, honey.
That's the thing that I feel I could respect.
Try, honey. Try.
You know how I can get in touch with the Pullen?
Yes, you drop me a note, and I'll send your note on to her. Okay?
Very good.
You do that.
Thank you.
Bernard Meltzer, 1440 Broadway. Charlotte will give you all the information.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Charlotte. And send this lady 2 T-shirts, too.